Welcome back to Untold Revenge Files. Today, the story you're about to hear takes place in Crestwood, Virginia. My name is Elena. I'm 23 years old, and I'm about to tell you how my stepmother tried to steal my future while smiling at me across the dinner table. Some betrayals come fast. A single moment. A slammed door. Words you can never unhear. But the betrayal I experienced? It crept in slowly, like water seeping through cracks in a foundation. By the time I noticed the damage, the rot had already spread deep. I was 15 when my mother died. Ovarian cancer. She fought for 18 months, and I watched her shrink in that hospital bed until she was barely there at all. Her name was Catherine, and she was the kind of mother who left notes in my lunchbox until I was 14. Who taught me how to change a tire in our driveway. Who told me every single day that I was strong enough to handle whatever life threw at me. I didn't believe her. Not really. Not until I had to prove it. My father, Robert, remarried 2 years later. Diane Patterson entered our lives like a spring breeze, warm, refreshing, exactly what our grief-stricken house seemed to need. She was attentive. She asked about my day. She cooked my mother's recipes and said she was doing it to honor Catherine's memory. I wanted so badly to believe it was real. At 18, I enlisted in the Army. It was always the plan Mom and I had talked about it. I'd serve, use the GI Bill, get my engineering degree. She'd helped me map out every step. After she died, I held on to that plan like a lifeline. It was the last thing she'd helped me build. Basic training was brutal, but I made it through. I moved up to E5 faster than most, and suddenly I had a real income. Real savings. A future I was building with my own hands. That's when things at home started to shift. Before I tell you exactly what Diane did next, tell me, what time is it where you are right now, and where are you watching from? I'm really curious to see how far the story will travel. It started small. Comments during phone calls. Your father and I were talking, Elena, and we think it would be so much easier if we consolidated accounts. You know, for emergencies. Family security. I said no, politely. I thought that was the end of it. But the comments kept coming. During my visits home, Diane would mention how lucky they were to have my income supporting the household. She'd say it in front of relatives, in front of neighbors, like I was already paying their bills, like my paycheck belonged to her. My father said nothing. He'd look at his plate, push food around, and stay silent. The first real warning came when I noticed files missing from my mother's old home office. It was a small room we'd converted after she passed. Dad used it for paperwork now. But certain folders were gone. The ones with my savings bonds from childhood. The ones with my mother's life insurance documents. Then the bank alert started. I was stationed at Fort Lee when my phone buzzed with a notification I'll never forget. Credit inquiry detected. Then another. Then a third. All tied to my father's home address. Someone was running my credit, checking my accounts, trying to gain access without my knowledge. My hands started shaking. That cold, sick feeling you get when you realize someone you trusted is reaching into your life without permission. I called my bank. They confirmed attempts to add an authorized user to my account. They'd been declined, my security settings caught them, but someone had tried. More than once. When I came home for a long weekend, I waited until Diane and my father were both out. Then I searched the house. My heart pounded the entire time. I felt like a criminal in my own childhood home. I found it in the spare bedroom closet. A manila folder labeled Planning. Inside was a budget spreadsheet. It listed my current income, my projected future income after promotions. My savings balance, somehow, they'd gotten a rough number. There were loan applications, draft documents. One of them listed my expected future earnings as collateral for a home renovation project. But the worst part? The handwritten note clipped to the front page. It was Diane's handwriting. I recognized it from birthday cards, grocery lists, the little notes she'd leave on the counter. She'll say yes eventually, or just needs to be more direct. She owes us after everything we've done. I stood in that closet, holding proof that my stepmother had been planning to use me. That she'd calculated my worth down to the dollar. That my father, my own father, was part of it. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, feeling something inside me go very, very cold. I took photos of everything, every document, every draft, every note. Then I put the folder back exactly as I'd found it. That night, I sat at the dinner table while Diane talked about the weather and my father avoided my eyes. I smiled. I nodded. I said nothing about what I'd found, because I wasn't going to react. I was going to respond. I had no idea that confronting them would mean losing my father, but I also had no idea that protecting myself would finally set me free. The drive back to base felt longer than usual. My mind kept replaying that note. She'll say yes eventually. Like my consent was just a matter of time. Like I was a resource to be harvested, not a person with rights. I barely slept that week. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Diane's handwriting. I heard my father's silence at every dinner table, every phone call, every visit where he chose not to see what was happening right in front of him. Part of me wanted to call him, scream at him, demand to know how he could let this happen, how he could participate in planning my financial exploitation while I was serving my country. But I knew that's what they expected. They expected emotion, chaos, something they could spin into Elena's overreacting or she's being dramatic. I wasn't going to give them that. The next morning, I walked into the military legal assistance office on base. The JAG officer who saw me was a captain named Danielle Brooks. She had kind eyes and a no-nonsense voice that made me feel like I wasn't crazy. Start from the beginning, she said. Show me everything. I did. The bank alerts, the photos of the planning folder, the documents listing my income as collateral for loans I'd never agreed to, the unauthorized credit inquiries tied to my father's address. Captain Brooks's expression got progressively darker as she reviewed each piece of evidence. This is identity theft, she said finally. At minimum, it's fraud. The fact that it's family doesn't change the legal reality, Elena. What they're attempting is criminal. I felt my chest tighten. Criminal. My father. My stepmother. Criminal. What are my options? I asked. She laid them out methodically. I could file a police report. I could pursue charges. Or I could handle this privately first, confront them with the evidence and demand formal legal agreements that protected me going forward. If you want to preserve any relationship with your father, she said carefully, the private route gives you that option. But you need witnesses. You need documentation. And you need to be prepared for them to deny everything. That night, I sat in my barracks room and made a list. Not pros and cons, I was past that. I made a list of every boundary I needed to set, every protection I needed to establish, every legal safeguard that would ensure they could never touch my future again. Then I started executing. I froze my credit with all 3 bureaus. I opened new accounts at a completely different bank, one with no connection to my father's address or information. I changed every password, every security question. I removed my father as my emergency contact on military paperwork. My friend and fellow NCO, Marcus Webb, found me in the common area at 2 in the morning, surrounded by paperwork. Elena, what's going on? I told him. Everything. The planning folder. The loan drafts. The note about me owing them. My father's silence. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked the question that cut straight through my fog of confusion. Would you accept this from anyone else? A stranger? A coworker? Would you let them plan to use your income without your consent? Of course not. Then why accept it from them just because they call themselves family? He was right. I already knew what I had to do. I just needed someone to say it out loud. I scheduled time off for the following month. I contacted a civilian mediator through the Legal Assistance Office. I prepared a formal evidence file, copies of everything, organized chronologically, with clear documentation of each unauthorized attempt to access my finances. Then I called my father. I'm coming home next weekend, I said. We need to have a family meeting. All 3 of us. It's important. Diane's voice chirped in the background. Oh, wonderful. I'll make your favorite dinner. I said nothing. I just confirmed the date and hung up. The night before I left, I sat on my bunk and held my mother's photograph. The one I kept in my footlocker. She was smiling at the camera, her hand resting on her hip, looking at me like she believed I could do anything. "I wish you were here, Mom," I whispered. "I wish you could tell me I'm doing the right thing." But she couldn't, and I had to trust myself. The next morning, I woke with steel in my spine and clarity in my chest. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I felt ready. I was done being the family resource. It was time to be my own person. The meeting didn't happen at my father's house. I arranged it at a neutral location, a conference room at the mediator's office downtown. When I called to confirm, I could hear the confusion in my father's voice. "A mediator? Elena, what is this about?" "You'll understand when we get there," I said. "Bring Diane." They arrived looking bewildered. Diane was dressed like she was attending a church luncheon. My father looked older than I remembered, grayer, more tired. For a split second, I felt sorry for him. Then I remembered the note. "She'll say yes eventually." The mediator, a calm woman named Patricia Holloway, had already reviewed my evidence file. She laid it out on the table as we sat down, Diane and my father on one side, me on the other, Captain Brooks attending as my advocate. "I'm going to be direct," I began. "I know what you've been doing. The credit inquiries, the planning folder, the loan applications listing my income as collateral, the attempts to add authorized users to my accounts." Diane's face went pale. My father stared at the table. "Elena," Diane started, her voice high and sweet, "I don't know what you think you found, but there's obviously been some misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding." I slid the photos across the table. The planning folder, her handwriting, the budget based on my future earnings, the draft documents. If you've ever witnessed the moment someone realizes they've been caught, truly caught, with evidence they cannot deny, then you know the particular silence that followed. It was thick, suffocating, complete. "This is what's going to happen," I continued. My voice was steady. "I'd practiced this. You're going to sign a written acknowledgement that my finances are mine alone. You're going to sign a statement admitting that prior attempts to access my accounts were unauthorized. And you're going to agree, in writing, that my name, my income, and my credit can never be used in any applications, loans, or planning without my explicit written consent." "You can't make us," Diane started. Actually, Captain Brooks interrupted. She can. "Because the alternative is a fraud investigation. Identity theft charges. The documentation here is more than sufficient to proceed legally." For the first time in years, Diane looked at me like she actually saw me. Not as a resource. Not as a stepkid to manage. But as someone who could hurt her back. "Elena." My father's voice was barely a whisper. "I didn't. I never meant." "You knew." The words came out harder than I intended. "You knew what she was planning. You saw the documents. You heard her talk about my income like it belonged to you. And you said nothing. You did nothing. That's not innocence, Dad. That's participation." The room was silent. The mediator walked them through the documents I'd prepared. Diane's hand shook as she signed. My father's signature was small, cramped, nothing like his usual bold scrawl. When it was over, I gathered the signed papers. I looked at both of them one last time. "I'm not doing this because I hate you," I said. "I'm doing this because you don't get to take what isn't yours." My mother taught me that. I walked out of that conference room feeling like I'd set down a weight I didn't even know I was carrying. After everything you've just heard, how do you think Elena should handle her relationship with her father going forward? Would you forgive him for his silence? Or is some damage too deep to repair? Months passed. I threw myself into my career, earned another promotion, started taking night classes toward my engineering degree, the one Mom and I had planned together. I made friends. Real ones. People who knew my story and didn't expect anything from me except honesty. My father called once, about 6 weeks after the meeting. He apologized. Said Diane had pushed him into it. Said he didn't realize how far things had gone. I listened. I told him I appreciated the apology. Then I said I needed time. I still need time. Knowing they'd been stopped, that they couldn't touch my future anymore, should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like quiet, like finally closing a door I'd been standing in front of for years. I wondered if my mother would be proud. I hoped she would. A year later, I stood in front of my mother's grave. It was Mother's Day. The cemetery was dotted with other visitors, families laying flowers, people sitting quietly on benches, children too young to understand why they were there. I'd brought lilies, her favorite. I protected what wasn't theirs to take, Mom, I said quietly. I protected our plan. I protected me. The headstone didn't answer. Of course it didn't. But standing there, feeling the spring breeze on my face, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not happiness, exactly. Not triumph. Just peace. I hadn't spoken to Diane since the mediation. I'd heard through distant relatives that she and my father were struggling. The renovations they'd planned, the ones they'd hoped to fund with my unknowing contribution, never happened. Some of their friends had asked questions. Diane's sister had stopped calling. I didn't feel satisfied by their struggles. I just felt separate from them, like they existed in a chapter of my life that was finally, permanently closed. My father reached out again about 8 months after the mediation. This time, the message was different. Elena, Diane, and I are going through a hard time. The house needs repairs we can't afford. I'm not asking for money. I know I have no right. I miss you. I want to have a relationship with you again. Can we try? I read that message probably 20 times. Part of me, the 15-year-old girl who lost her mother, the girl who desperately wanted to believe Diane was a fresh start, wanted to say yes, wanted to believe people could change, wanted to have a father again. But another part of me, the grown woman who'd found that folder, who'd sat across from her father while he signed documents admitting to betrayal, knew better. I wrote back eventually. Dad, I hope you and Diane find stability. I genuinely do. But I'm not able to go back to the relationship we had before. Too much happened. Too much damage was done. I'm building a life now, and it needs to be built on foundations I can trust. I don't trust you. Maybe that can change someday. Maybe it can't. Either way, I need to focus on my own path forward. I wish you well. He didn't respond. Sometimes I wonder if I was too harsh. If I should have given him another chance. If forgiveness means opening the door again, even when you know you might get hurt. But I've learned something in the years since my mother died, since I discovered what my stepmother and father had planned, since I sat in that mediation room and demanded they sign away their access to my future. Forgiveness doesn't mean reunion. You can wish someone well without inviting them back into your life. You can acknowledge their humanity without sacrificing your own safety. You can love someone from a distance and still protect yourself up close. My mother used to say that boundaries aren't walls, they're gates. You get to choose who walks through. You get to choose what stays inside. I spent years feeling guilty about that. Feeling like a good daughter should forgive, should reconcile, should put family above everything else. But I'm not a resource. I'm not a backup plan. I'm not collateral for someone else's dreams. I'm Elena Reyes. I'm a soldier. I'm an engineer in training. I'm someone who honors her mother's memory by building the life they planned together, not by letting people dismantle it piece by piece. Last week, I finished my first year of night classes. Straight A's. My advisor says I'm on track to graduate in 3 years if I keep this pace. When she told me that, I thought about my mother's lunchbox notes, about the tire-changing lesson in the driveway, about her voice telling me I was strong enough to handle whatever life threw at me. She was right. I am. So after everything you've heard, if you are standing where I am now, with a father who participated in planning to exploit you asking for another chance, would you open the door and call it forgiveness? Or would you protect your peace and call it self-respect? I chose peace. And I think my mother would understand. Some people will say I'm cold. Some people will say family should always come first. Some people will never understand why I couldn't just get over it and move on. But those people have never found a folder with their name on it, calculating their worth in dollars and cents. Those people have never read a note that said they'd say yes eventually, like their consent was just an inconvenience to work around. I know what I'm worth now. And it's not a number on a spreadsheet. It's the life I'm building, the boundaries I'm keeping, the promise I made to my mother and to myself. That's worth everything. And there you have it. Elena didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't beg for an apology that was never going to be real. She documented. She protected herself. And she walked away with her dignity and her future intact. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the same ones counting your money behind your back. And when that happens, you don't owe them forgiveness. You don't owe them access. You don't owe them anything. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever dealt with a family member who treated you like an ATM instead of a person? Someone who smiled in your face while planning to take what was yours? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. And trust me, you are not alone. If this story made you feel something, if it made you angry, made you nod your head, made you think about your own situation, hit that like button right now. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Subscribe and tap that notification bell so you never miss another story. We're dropping new ones every day, and the next one? It's going to make this look like a warm-up. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's being used. Someone who's too kind for their own good. Sometimes one story can change everything. Until next time, remember, your peace is not for sale. Your boundaries are not negotiable. And your future belongs to you. This is Untold Revenge Files. Stay sharp. Stay strong. And I'll catch you in the next one.